Bolton bolts the dolt, or is it the dolt bolted Bolton? That is the operative question this week as I, Halli Casser-Jayne, and my partner in politics, veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper, tackle the top political stories of the week on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. In our second half hour, we welcome the esteemed editor of the New York Times Book Review and author Pamela Paul in a conversation about one of my favorite topics, books. Welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, always available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. We begin with politics. Here we go. We haven't seen each other in ages, darling. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
I missed you. Did you miss me? Tell me the truth. You didn't.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot has happened since last we spoke. I'm going to start with the biggest story of the week. Sarah Palin's husband, Todd, files for divorce citing incompatibility of temperament. You know why I said that, though, Matt? I mean, I'm laughing, and it's sad because no marriage should break up or whatever, but this is somehow symbolic of everything that's so in upheaval in our country this right now. I mean, there's something there, Miss Sarah Palin, when to me, she was the beginning of where we are right now in a way, and her holier than thou thing, which, kid by kid, grandchild by grandchild is, and here we are. It's fitting to begin because this has been, every time you think we've reached a new low.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me. Anything there for you to say?
Well, look, you never understand anyone else's marriage. Sometimes not even your own.
You got that true.
Often not even your own. I mean, she's, I never begrudge anyone for, having a complicated personal life. But, she's, what's interesting is that the party became so Palinized, but she continued to drop out of sight. She wasn't able to take advantage of some of the things that she wrought. It's
interesting to me, really, how symbolic she has become, though. When, as you say, she's really not even all that much in the public eye anymore.
No.
But, whoa. That's all I want to give her. I just had to say that because I do think that
I hear you.
There's a thing there. But here's where I want to go next to talk to you about, because this was extraordinary, even for me, Floridian that I am these days, and that's Hurricane Dorian, which is one of the reasons we haven't spoken, because it's pretty dicey around here.
I mean, where did you shelter during all that?
Well, actually, I stayed in place, and for the first time boarded up, which is something I've never done before, because really the maps were really showing a direct hit to Vero, and so we weren't playing around with that. I have a metal roof on my house, so we were feeling pretty secure that would hold up and what have you. But this was the most disruptive hurricane that hasn't ever hit I've ever experienced. Everybody was insane. I mean, hours getting gas if you could find gas, stores empty on let's see, they announced it the week before it actually came through or came by. No water. It really was havoc. So, the state ought to know better. They're still not doing a really good job on it. And what even happened?
So
even though we
governor,
got nothing?
Did the governor have a good hurricane?
Listen, he's a very personal guy. He's kind of goofy.
Right.
Don't you find him goofy a little bit? There's a
I don't see him enough. I don't, he's just not on national TV enough to know.
He's the least sophisticated governor I've ever seen in the state of Florida. There is zero sophistication to this man. He's just kind of a blue-collar Republican, which is weird. It's like, he's just really an anomaly. You pay a little attention to him because it's interesting. And he is starting to, he's acting as his own man to some degree. He's not, he's appealing to the left as much as he is to the right. So I'm giving him some kudos on whatever. I don't blame this on what happened on him. I mean, this is just infrastructure stuff that, that they don't have. I mean, and he was admitting we can't get water in, we can't get gas in, we'll do what we can. But I will say that we even didn't have mail for 2 days, even though the thing didn't hit. Now, what in the world? I mean, what in the world? Now, that's federal. And they were saving money.
Yeah.
So it was a mess. And it took almost 2 weeks out of my existence. And like I said, it's the only time that's happened. And this is the hurricane that didn't hit. But that takes us to Noah and Trump and Alabama. And watching that after all of this, grrr.
It's kind of unbelievable.
Talk to me about this crazy man.
You know, everybody's got to accommodate his fantasy world. So, even the government's weathermen have to say, that's right. The hurricane was heading towards Alabama. Look, I mean, it's, when you're getting into fights with Al Roker, you're in a weird place.
But he digs in, and he digs in. And the people around him allow him.
And to no end, it's not like this is going to galvanize his base because he said it was getting towards Alabama. If there's one group that America probably likes after the military, it's weathermen.
That's true. That's true.
Everybody likes their local weather guy or Al Roker. And, for him to be just getting into a fight with them is just,
bizarre. Absolutely.
It's not, I mean, at least when he attacks, the squad or something else, it has a political end and there's a certain logic to it, even if it's, odious in its own way. But this is just weird. This really is the emperor shows up with no clothes and everybody has to applaud.
Right. Except to say that at the time that he was carrying on like this and wouldn't renege on it, here's what was going on. Polls were coming out that were destroying him. And that never got discussed at the time. So
that's true.
There is always a method to his madness. And, then you have to get back to, why. Listen, this one was amusing in a way. And we could, we down in Florida needed the amusement, I will tell you. But I will also say that, again, you've got the press following him wherever the shiny light goes. And it's like they can't do two things at the same time. They can't give equal, power or exposure or time on their news programs to two topics at a time. There has to.
Well, that's true. That's true. So well, he, I mean, Congress being out didn't. There wasn't a real counterweight to it at the time. But yes, I agree. The press does follow him.
Okay, you talk about Congress being out. I'll go with that right now, and I will just say 6 weeks in the midst of this insanity. How dare they? And do you realize that when they came back, yesterday? Or the day before, or whatever day it was, that they only have 40 days to do nothing? 44 days, that's what's left. 44 days to do nothing, and they're scheduled to leave again. Are they kidding? Is Nancy kidding? I mean, this just riles me. Everything's riling me lately.
Yeah. Well, this is a long-time trend, They're just spending less and less time here, more time back home, more time hustling for money.
And not listening to their constituents, the Democrats who are being told from meeting to meeting, will you please impeach this son of a gun? And Nancy just rolls her eyes and says, no.
Yeah, well, there is a gathering storm on this investigation stuff, but it's a slow gather.
How do you gather it when you only have 43 days starting today?
Well, that doesn't help.
Okay, so it's like this is all crapola. I mean, she did a thing yesterday about guns. Did you see it?
I knew they were doing it.
Well, she was walking down the hall and she was just, as much as she shows emotion, she was, blaming it, of course, on the Republicans, yada, 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 yada. And her daughter tweeted and said, that's my mom, she'll, the fighter, the fighter. The fighter would take her little red high heels and, chuck along to the steps of Capitol Hill and bring her mattresses and her dark glasses, and if it's getting cool up there, her red coat, and look stunning, and say, we're not leaving here until you bring this to a vote. That's fighting.
Right.
That's fighting. And I'm sorry, the Dems need to really start fighting. And they are not fighting. They're hoping and praying. They're not fighting.
Yeah. I agree. I think this felt very, the mass shootings happened while Congress was away or about to be away for the first one. And so they came back, ready to do guns. But it was sort of by that point
off the radar.
A little off the radar and not related to the impeachment question. So it fell a little flat. I agree with you.
Am I being too hard on Nancy Pelosi, or does she seem feckless? I mean, Schumer is, and that's partly because he's not in control of the Senate. But she just doesn't seem to be doing her job, Matt.
Well, she's in a different place than the rest of the caucus. That's the thing. She's, as we've long discussed, she hasn't come around on impeachment the way her people have.
So there's a comparison here between the Democrats and the Republicans, because the people behind the scenes in the Republican Party are going crazy and off the record screaming about Trump. They won't do it on record because, right? And the Democrats are doing the same thing. They're letting the quote-unquote leaders erroneously lead both parties. At this point, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not sure I see any difference between the two parties. They're just the yin and the yang of the other. I see them both as, just kind of immoral, playing politics over what's right and what have you. All right, I'm beating a dead horse, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it still makes a difference what they vote for and what they pass. And the Democrats can vote all they want and pass whatever they want. Doesn't matter. Do nothing, Nancy. Right. Do nothing, Congress. That's the reality, because it doesn't matter what they plan, what they vote on, because it isn't going anywhere. So if you know that, that's when you get your little butt up on Capitol Hill and you start to do things a little differently and say, we're not going to take this anymore. Somebody has to do something to break the loggerhead. No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad you hear me. Okay, change of subject. Bolton's bolted.
Yeah.
Or Bolton was fired.
Bolton gone. You start out with, oh my God, he hired John Bolton.
In the first place.
Oh my God. And by the end, you're like, oh no, John Bolton's leaving. What? It can always get worse. Who's it going to be this time?
When Democrats start defending John Bolton, neocon.
It's Steve Doocy, National Security Advisor.
God, it's so scary. Does anybody realize the absurdity of all of this? I mean, it's just insane. It's totally insane. Is there anything eye-opening in what happened here, or is this just the same old, with the caveat that he may be the one who was so volatile by nature that he may open up a mouth? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yes and no. Bolton is all elbows and always has been.
Yeah.
So his getting people angry at him is pretty familiar. I'm sure Condi Rice can sympathize with Pompeo. So in that sense, it was kind of predictable. What's interesting is that, Trump is so much less of a hawk than people might have thought. That, he's ready, he's in love with Kim, and he's ready to, have a state dinner for the Taliban, and he wants to dismantle human intelligence. And that's what this really pointed out, that there might have been reason to think Trump would be a little more hesitant about foreign wars, but there's no reason to think he'd be Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah.
But now we know.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that help us?
No, I don't think that helps us. I don't at all. And I think that's the
thing.
That's what's interesting, I think, in a strange way, as odious as Bolton has been throughout his career. He was a reckless UN ambassador and, scuttled every international agreement he could when he was in the Bush and Reagan administrations. But in this case, he was a useful counterweight, to a president who wants to, who wants to take romantic vacations with Vladimir Putin and and so that's why a lot of normal people are kind of a little sad to see him go and are worried that, it can always get worse.
Well, that's true. But I'm curious as to, it's always been the talk that behind the scenes, everybody's got a lot to say. Yeah, Trump is nuts. Yeah, he's a mess. Yeah, Trump this, Trump that. But they're not willing to go on camera and say it on any level. And former people from the administration, I'll talk after he's out of office or I'll whatever.
Right.
I'm just, the thing that would be curious here is if Bolton actually breaks that juggernaut and talks.
Right.
And
because McMaster
right.
and Kelly and
right.
Mattis and others are not really willing to say.
Yeah, they're playing by the old rules,
He's a lunatic.
Right. But, I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter yesterday or last night about that, and I said, I don't know what's worse here. If they talk, these guys, if they come forward, all of them, en masse, let's say, and say, okay, yeah, he's crazy, and we got a nutcase in the White House, what that does for national security issues. That's a real question because, you got a weak man at the top of the, the food chain here, and people like Putin can play that for all it's worth. That's really something that, I would think is behind the thinking of those former general types who've kept their mouths shut. Besides, they take an oath of office.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah. On the other hand, it's a useful acknowledgement of what,
well, here's where it becomes
think already.
Right. And it would be very useful, Matt, if you had Pelosi and impeachment behind their coming forward. That would, diffuse what a Putin or even, a Kim or the rest of those morons, out there, or the Taliban even, could take advantage of. And that's, I think that's worth the conversation. It's odd to me that I haven't seen it anywhere. But Bolton is a loose cannon, so let's see.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to stay quiet.
I don't.
The question is whether he waits to write a book or if he just can't. If he starts sounding off tomorrow. Right.
Well, I'm for the sound off tomorrow, darling. I want to hear what you have to say, and I'll read your book for sure if you sound off tomorrow. And I may not read it if you don't. You brought up the Taliban and this Camp David thing. God, Matt, that was just crazy crap.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you think way back to what Jimmy Carter did at Camp David in forging the Israeli-Egyptian agreement, where he spent weeks out there with Bacon and Sadat, and Trump would be incapable of any of that. So you wonder what would actually get done out there.
Well,
out in the woods.
even bringing them.
It is like having a state dinner for them. It's just a
like,
bridge too
ew,
far.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if you're New York, I just imagine how the New York City Fire Department's going to react. When the Taliban delegation arrives at Andrews.
It's just
gets shuttled in limos up to Camp David.
Okay, another story that popped: Trump and spies. What is this story? First of all, is fluid.
Yes.
And everybody's got a different take on it. What's your take? Give a background and then give us quickly your take. And I don't have a lot of time for this, though.
Right. Well, there appears that the U.S. had a really high spy in Moscow, and that there was concern that the guy was going to get found out, and he seemed to have been the main guy to confirm that Putin really wanted to elect Trump. And, they tried to pull him out. The spy balked at leaving Russia the first time, then the second time they got him out. And now there's a lot of concern about whether, the Russians can get to him here and kill him, because they have a long record of killing spies, people, who've turned on them. So that, it doesn't seem that they pulled him because they worried Trump would expose him. But the bigger problem is Trump is telling everyone he doesn't believe in spies. He just doesn't want human spies. He thinks it's bad for making deals. I mean, so, spies have been part of diplomacy and warfare for thousands of years, and...
they're spying on us, but we should not spy on them.
It's insane.
Okay.
No one would suggest that we can't have espionage, human espionage.
No, someone would. Donald Trump.
Yeah, now that really, when you hear something like that,
then you say to yourself, what really is going on here?
Yeah, that does make you think he's got crazy ties, because it's so unmacho. It's just, you would think, just the James Bond. He would like the James Bond part of it.
I don't see Trump as caught up in the macho thing. I never did. Now.
Well, I guess in some ways not. I mean, in some ways, Mr. Tough, acts tough.
But that's, I don't see him as, he's no James Bond on any level, no matter who played the part. This is so crazy, though. And
but he's always like, I have the best military. The military was so broken until I got here.
Well, that's just before ego.
So on one hand, he's doing that. On the other hand, he's like, well, whatever.
But that story, that story is not over. That there's some way to go on that.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's something very, very insane there. But will we listen? You talked about whether or not he's in Putin's hand. I'm thinking Nancy Pelosi sometimes is. I'm thinking they've all been compromised.
I'm not going to give you a could be for that one. You don't get a could be.
You think I'm off my rocker? Okay.
I don't really think Nancy Pelosi, her hesitance about impeachment is because she's like getting rubles on the side.
I don't know. I just don't know what to make of any of it. I just don't. Like I said, I just don't. You and I are not alone in sitting here, before a microphone talking about this kind of stuff and our frustration, with both parties. It just, at what point does it make a difference? Do people really rise up in arms? Now, that takes me to an election last night in North Carolina. It turned out to be a squeaker. The Dan McCready lost, the Democrat, to Dan Bishop, but it was by nothing. But there was something in that. It was very tight, and there was something in that election that I want to talk about. It's my understanding the loss. The Dems did gain where they needed to gain, and a lot, but the loss was in one little area where it was a 6% jump from the previous election that had to be scrapped because it was illegal. And that's in the rural area again. And so the rural numbers are going up for Trump, which is pretty bizarre when you think about trade and everything else that Trump is screwing them on. And the jobs that he promised that aren't there, but there you have it. And it was pointed out to me that the machinery that they used for this election, first of all, that 6% jump was weird, and there's no way to go back and play and check it again. And was it fixed in a second time? And before I go to why I wanted to bring this up now, you have anything to say about that? If not, that's fine.
Well, I think, I just think, the Democrat lost the seat, but there are good signs for Democrats in that election, the fact it was so close.
Okay. I bring it up because of rural America. And here's where I'm going with rural America. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The only candidate to be focused on rural America, where this election will be won or lost, is, drum roll, Steve Bullock.
Yes. I was wondering when you'd get your boyfriend.
I'm still on it.
I think,
he's getting a little ink now. It's not like he's not out there. People, I hear him. They've got him on the shows, he's still standing. He's still standing. And no joke, he is making an issue of what the Democratic Party having to get into these rural areas and fix this. It shouldn't be this way. They should be ours, not the Republicans. And he's saying it over and over in all of his mail that comes at us about rural America. And he won in rural America in Montana. Hello.
Yeah.
Again, we learned also last night, moderates are going to win. The Democrats' only way to win is with moderates.
No question.
Well,
I mean, I think
yes,
in the congressional races, the presidential's a little more complicated. You can't, I don't think Michael Bennet would be the strongest nominee against Trump for some reasons, and one of them is you gotta fire up the.
No, he doesn't have the sexy He's not sexy.
Yeah. But, nationally, you got to fire up, minorities. And, district by district, the moderates are taking those seats back. But nationally, it's sort of a different game.
Well, it is sort of a different game, but I'm saying to you, Elizabeth Warren, I'm sorry. Bernie Sanders, I'm sorry. You want those swing voters? I'm sorry.
No, you got to get the swings and you got to fire up your people. It's a delicate act. You need, this is what Clinton was good at. Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton. And I equate Steve Bullock to a Bill Clinton, by the way.
Yeah.
He just hasn't gotten his moment, and he needs his moment.
You're going to get it for him.
I don't know how I'm going to get it for him, but I wish I could get it for him because I'm really concerned about what the Democrats are doing here. The progressive versus the moderate wing. This is just a nightmare. And I don't know where, Biden stands in all of this, or even if he can hold up through all of this. I do think at the moment, just because he's on top as compared to those others below him, that he's the best shot. But
he does seem like, you could make a case for that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. That he can get the swings,
right.
And then he's got enough.
And he's got the black vote.
He's got enough minority cred. Right. You can make a case for that.
I don't see Elizabeth.
In other ways, he's risky.
Well, there's only one way that he's risky.
Yeah, but that's a big way.
I don't know. I don't know whether it's fact-based or we were talking about gaffes and age?
Gaffes, age, the sense that time's passed him by,
I don't get the time's passed him. Yeah, I don't get the time passing them by part. I don't get that at all. But I do get the other, and that's why I'm saying the only other candidate on that roster who fits his bill is Steve Bullock. Now, I know he's in a huge fight. He's still fighting with the party power on his running for the Senate. And if they let go of that, they need a backup plan. They've even written movies with titles called The Backup Plan. They need a backup plan, and they don't have it. And they can't throw all their weight to Bernie and Elizabeth. I'm sorry, they can't. And everybody else is out of it as far as I'm concerned.
I think somebody's going to surge. That's been the history. Somebody's going to surprise.
And who are you banking on that being? Curious.
I don't know. I'm not being coy, but I think, I just wouldn't totally write out, Booker, Klobuchar.
Oh, I would.
I
do.
There's always a chance someone can surge. It often happens.
Yeah, I agree with it. It often happens. I don't see it being those two. Although, Klobuchar, if this was 1959, be a perfect candidate.
Well, 1959 should be in the kitchen, but yeah.
No, but you know what I mean.
I get your point.
Yeah. So, that's just the way it is. You have to have star power these days to be president at the same time.
No, I hear you.
That's whatever. One other thing before we go, a couple of things real quick that we should address. One is the military using the Trump hotels. And again, I'll tell you why I'm bringing it up, Matt, because no news here other than we know that, he's been a grifter's grift, darling.
Yeah, he just can't help himself.
That's just who he is, and that's what it's about. But this gets back to the Democrats doing nothing. Here's an exercise for you for next week, okay? I'll do it with you. Go through all the things that have been caught that he's done on emoluments, on everything that...
Right.
And tell me why he has gotten away with every single one. It would fit 20 pages of things.
I agree. Let's have the bar Christmas party at the Trump Hotel and everything else.
Right. Yeah. So this is a conversation that needs to be had. It needs to be had.
I agree. It's not like Dems don't have anything to work with.
Right. Okay. So that's pretty upsetting to me. I want to bring up Israel. The election is next week. Bibi is going bonkers. They had a hell of a moment yesterday when they had to actually take him from a speech because bombs went off. Thank you, Gaza.
Right.
And they haven't done that with a prime minister in a really, really long time. And his response was basically, I'm taking back the West Bank. Hello. It's just like, we'll talk about that next week because that's going to be some election. I don't know whether he gets back or he doesn't get back, but it's been fascinating to watch his game.
It's true. It's a little bit of a sign of desperation. Remember, he was supposed to win the first time.
Well, he did win the first time. The problem was he couldn't get a coalition.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But, winning is winning and getting a coalition.
It was only one person, and he's been his nemesis for years. So
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But, he's fighting, and he could prevail, and there's a chance he may not. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. Brexit, can we just say...
Well, that's going well.
Wow, what a mess. But you see how messy that looks to us? That's how we look to them.
Well, sure.
Yeah,
it's totally self-inflicted.
Yeah, crazy.
They had a population that was all agitated about immigration and it started the ball rolling, and nobody can really control it.
This is Steve Bannon's baby, by the way.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
Absolutely.
What a mess.
On the other hand, the Italians did jettison their far-right leadership.
Did.
So,
which is odd for them, because usually they're in the thick of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll leave you on Jerry Falwell and Liberty University.
Yeah, sweet guy.
Wow. And it looks like there's going to be some kind of investigation into him by the FBI. And this morning, more pictures floated of him on a discotheque, if that's the term, in Miami, that he said he swore he was never at. I also bring that up the same way I rang up. Oh, you're in good shape, Halli. Sarah Palin in the beginning. And then we get to what is holding Trump up, which is, the evangelical vote. And it's a mess. There's a book to be written.
Well, the vote's holding him up, and that's probably not going to change. No matter what happens with Falwell or any individual icon.
At some point, you have to say if they could get Falwell, they might get Trump. That's a thought. Now, that leaves an opening for you, for your CB, but you didn't take it.
Oh, that's true. Could be. Could be.
I have to go, darling.
Okay. Always good talking to you. Glad you're back.
You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at HalliCasserJayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say, the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. I love this quote from Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. That is no small truth. New York Times book review editor and children's book editor for the New York Times Book Review, Maria Russo, share GRRM's point of view and are on a mission to reach out to the young. Together they have written How to Raise a Reader, an informative and beautifully packaged book on fostering a lifelong love of books from birth to teens. But make no mistake, this isn't a primer only for parents. It is a celebration of the book, a reminder for us all that there is a vast world available to us all, one bookstore, library, ebook away. In a world where way too much time is spent staring at a screen by teenagers and adults alike, How to Raise a Reader might just be the gift book for all who would rather experience 1,000 lives before they die, not just one. Let's talk with the esteemed New York Times Book Review editor, Pamela Paul. All right, so let me just say to you, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. And I have to tell you that as soon as I heard about your book, I had to reach out. Some might scoff at what I'm about to say, but I think your book might be one of the most important of this literary season. Reading books, Pamela, is so important in the development of a child. And can I also add in the maintenance of adults?
I agree.
Right?
I obviously agree.
All right. So just too many of us are glued, and the kids are glued to screens, computers, phones, TVs. So let's start here. Are parents and schools doing enough today to raise readers?
Well, I think that people recognize, both schools and parents recognize the importance of reading. So we know that books and becoming a reader is vital to a child's academic success. There's plenty of research to back that up. And then there was a wave of research that is now widely there's a great awareness of it, which shows that not only that, but also reading helps kids with executive function. It helps them with social and emotional behavior. It helps them with their development of social skills. It helps them become, what we think of, as you said, like as a good human being, as an engaged citizen, as a person who is, not just sort of culturally aware, but also that is able to function in a democracy. It's really important that people are smart, critical, engaged readers. So that we know. I think what we're less good at is figuring out, well, how do you actually get someone to become a reader? So in schools, they have, I think, a pretty tough situation in that everything is very test-based. They need to reach certain goals because school districts know how important it is. And so there's a lot of emphasis on getting kids to learn to read at younger and younger ages and having measurable results. So it's understandable why schools have done that. One of the inadvertent consequences of that, though, is that kids feel a lot of pressure. And of course, parents feel that pressure. If your kid is in third grade and is due for nationwide testing and they're not reading at level, that's scary. Or if your child is in kindergarten and every kid seems to be reading and your kid is still struggling to put, letters together to sort of have that phonemic awareness, that's also scary. And then for kids, they feel that. So they feel that pressure. They know if they are underperforming relative to their peers or if their teachers aren't happy about it. And teachers might think that, if you have level readers and it's an A through Z alphabet, the kid who's on D knows that other kids are on N. So that puts a lot of pressure on everyone. And it puts pressure on parents because parents know that they're supposed to be involved in the process. What we wanted to do with this book is, I think, give parents a little bit of support and comfort and reassurance that just because reading is important for their kids doesn't mean they have to teach their kids to read. And in fact, a parent teaching a child to read is really counterproductive in a lot of ways. It's the school's job to teach your child how to learn to read, to do the mechanics, to get that job done. Parents can support that. But what parents' job is to do is to get their child to love to read. And that becomes, in a way, harder when the kid is under so much pressure, because if they're feeling like they're not up to snuff, or even if they are and they know that's so hugely important, books become something that is it can be about negative feelings. It can make them feel bad about themselves, but it can also, if they're doing well, lead to an emphasis on extrinsic motivation, on getting A's and awards and pats on the back for how well they're doing. None of that is fun, right? None of that is fun. Yeah, and reading is actually fun. So what a parent's job is to help the child take pleasure, not pressure, in the experience of reading. It's to build in intrinsic motivation in your child so that your child is reading not because he's supposed to, not because he has to, but because he wants to. And it also becomes more and more important as the child gets older and has a lot of other options of things to do with his time. You want to make sure that your child is, when faced with homework and extracurricular activities and structured activities and after-school programs, and let's not forget screens, that he is saying, okay, but I want to fit in reading into that, because that's what a parent really wants to do. And that, I think, is frankly where a parent has the most power to make that happen. I'm so glad you said that. There are two words that come. One is magic. Reading, for me as a kid, and as you say in the book, magical, right? And maybe today what's going on is with all of this pressure in everything, these kids are up against so much today versus when I'm older than you are. When I was growing up, we didn't have that kind of pressure, but this the loss of the magic of what reading, and I'm going to speak in terms of books because to me a book is magical versus a screen, not so magical, right? Is an issue, a massive issue, and we could take that out on so many different levels when we talk about this magic. But there's also the written word and storytelling. And I'm so glad you used that word storytelling, because people talk about storytelling and people worry about the future of the book, especially given the prevalence of every other option that kids have out there. And let's face it, there are more options and some of them are really compelling. Like video games are fun. TV is so much better than it was when I was growing up. There's so many options. You know, I had like 5 channels and the shows were like Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch. Like that was not that enticing. Books were much better. There are so many other options, and that's not, you know, there's social media. There's just a lot out there for kids to do, and they also have so many more structured activities. But the truth of the matter is, I don't fear about the future of books because human beings love storytelling. And I think one of the best and most powerful vehicles to tell a story, to absorb a story, to enjoy a story is through books. And here's why. People talk about interactivity. They talk about games are fun because they're interactive. Books are the most interactive medium out there. When you think about a movie of a book versus a book, this is what you're getting. Let's say Harry Potter. Let's say you experience Harry Potter for the first time on screen. And the Harry Potter movies are wonderful, so I'm not saying anything bad about them. But what you're getting when you see Harry Potter on the screen is you're getting Emma Watson's interpretation of how Hermione sounds. You're hearing her voice. You're seeing the way she looks. You're seeing the costume designers, the sort of view of what a Hogwarts uniform looks like. You're seeing the cinematographer's perspective. You're seeing the special effects from a crack special effects team. You are getting, an entire team of people's interpretation of what that book is. If you're reading Harry Potter and you haven't seen the movies, you, the reader, are creating that story together with J.K. Rowling. You're deciding what the Patronus spell looks like. You're deciding what Hogwarts the castle looks like. You have a vision of Hermione in your mind. You're creating that story. It is truly interactive. That book, Harry Potter, before the movies, was different in every child's mind. Every child's experience of Harry Potter, the book, is different. It's their own.
Right.
And that's what makes books as a vehicle for storytelling so powerful. That's why those books stay with us for so long. That's why we all, when we become parents and we're like, what should my kid read? One of the first things we go back to are the books we read as children because they're such powerful, formative experiences. They endure because we helped create them. We had a vision of what Nancy Drew sounded like. Right. We had a vision of, the secret staircase. We thought we knew what, the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe looked like and what it felt like to be in that wardrobe and what it was like to see the Fawn for the first time. So I don't fear. I think that books are going away. And I think the job for parents, and this is a fun job, is to introduce kids to that magic from a very early age, and I'm talking about babyhood, so that as they get older, that's something that they want to do.
I hear you, and I want to stay on what you were talking about for a minute because we're talking imagination, and the greatest gift of book is to stimulate our imagination. And I think when we talk about TV or going on the computer screen, we're talking about a passive act versus sitting down with a book, which is a very active act, and it gets to your imaginative part of your brain. And what scares me, Pamela, which is, because I raised kids, that imagination is not being stimulated. They're taking that imagination away. Even in the arts in school, what's the first thing that's cut these days? Always the arts. Always the place that stimulates the imagination the most.
It's interesting because we're all focused on 21st century skills, right? So we think that 21st century skills means that kids should be on computers all the time, whereas in fact, the computer programs that kids would be using in schools, those have all been invented. Those are all easy to use because they were developed to be easy to use. And by the time that child grows up and enters the marketplace, those programs, those apps, those products will all be obsolete. So if you really want a child with 21st century skills, you want a child who is imagining and who is resourceful enough and imaginative enough to think of what comes after that. And that comes from a child who is reading. That comes from a child who is involved in open-ended activities like books, because that is what equips you with the skills to be resourceful, to imagine the world that does not yet exist. Not to be able to use the programs that already do.
Right. I love that, and I think that's critical. And I think that's critical, by the way, as a responsibility to a nation that I think is mightily devoid of imagination right now. But
yeah,
I'm interjecting me into that. I just want to say one thing. That is the roar of the paper, the smell of the ink. I'm sorry. Nothing goes past that for me. That's key. All right. So we're talking about the development of kids and teaching them and guiding them and stimulating them. And, we could use a lot of different words to become readers. Where do we start?
Well, you start before your child is born, frankly. But I do want to say it's never too early and it's never too late. So one of the things we wanted to do with this book is to make sure that this book speaks to people who have a 10-year-old boy who won't stop playing Fortnite, or a 14-year-old girl who the second she got her phone was on Instagram and Snapchat all day and sort of stopped reading, even if she was a voracious reader when she was, a preteen. So those it's sort of never too late to intervene and to get those kids back to books again. And we offer a lot of suggestions for that. But I would say to the expectant or new parent that you can never start too young. People talk about reading to their kids in the womb, and you can do that. You can do that, frankly, just to get yourself comfortable with reading aloud. There are a few factors that we know are really important that studies have shown to be predictive factors about what makes a child a lifelong reader. And these are the two things, and these are things you can start right away. One, reading aloud to your child. And there are lots of ways to do that well. And then some things that you can do that are actually not helpful. And we talk about those in the book, and we can talk about that more. And the other is the number of books you have in the home. So that's really interesting. All you have to do is surround your child with books. That also can sound expensive, but it doesn't have to be. There are lots of great books that are brand new in the bookstore that are, we know, pricey, but you can get used books. You can find them easily online. You can find them at library sales, and you can also just take books out continuously from the library so that reading becomes part of your family culture. That every week when you go to the supermarket, you also stop at the library, you pick up 20 books, you make sure that those are spread out around the house. And having a book filled with having a home filled with books is something that is actually really fun for parents. There are things that you can do to make sure that this sort of becomes a fertile opportunity for your kids, because when there is a book lying around, it's very hard for a child to say that she's bored. You should have books in the child's bedroom. If the child doesn't have her own bedroom, make sure that she has her own bookshelf. Kids love to own books. They're collectors. They love physical objects. Here's another interesting thing, getting back to the screens. Surveys show that kids prefer print books to screens, even teenagers. They're on screens all day. They're happy to have a break. Kids and teenagers love collecting, and they want to have that book experience feel like a book, especially if they've grown up in a home where reading has been part of a family culture. So you want to fill your house with books, have books in the living room, have them in the bathroom, so that, there's no temptation to bring an iPad into the bathroom. People read on the toilet and in the bath, let's face it. Have books that are on your shelf. Another really important thing, modeling. It starts with you. So you should be reading as well, and that's hard. Like, I work full time. I have 3 kids. I know it's really hard to fit these things in. Something often has to give. I don't watch nearly as much TV as I would like to, but I am always reading a book. And my kids know that. So my kids are older now. They're 10 and 12 and 14, but they know that at the end of the night, I want to get into bed, and I cannot fall asleep unless I read a few pages of my book. Guess what? My kids can't either now. And that's not because my kids are genetically inclined. It's because they saw that that's what I did. And that's also what their dad did. And there's another important point. People really worry about boys in reading. Studies show that boys don't see their fathers read as often as their mothers read. And here's another interesting thing. And again, this shows that there is stuff that parents can do. Parents of both sexes tend to read more to their daughters than they do to their sons.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you want to make sure, you want to make sure that your son isn't inadvertently absorbing a message that books aren't for boys. You want to make sure that he sees dad reading, that both parents are reading aloud to him as much as they are to his sister. Because parents can, we all grow up with cultural assumptions, but none of this is genetic. We also grow up with a cultural assumption of what a book is. And our idea of a book might not be our child's idea of a book. Boys like often to read books that are not necessarily novels. They're not necessarily a long narrative. They might be more inclined to comic books, to graphic novels, to collections of sports statistics, to, 101 wacky facts about buildings. Those are all books. So we can't look down our, nose at those kinds of books. Those reading choices should be affirmed and respected so that your child is leading the way and that your child gets to read what he wants to read. And that, again, goes back to my point that reading has to be fun. So let your kid read what he wants to read. When I was growing up, I read Smurf comics and Archies. I read sweet dream romances. That didn't prevent me from growing up to be an adult who reads, Thomas Mann and Toni Morrison. So it's fine if your kid is reading books that you think, you might be sort of worried, like, that's not a real book, or that looks too easy, or that's not on the level that he should be at that grade. Worry less about it. Because also, and this is, this is something that I think makes sense when you think about it, the more your kid is reading, the more that will positively impact his schoolwork. So if your kid is reading a lot, they're building in that 10,000, hours of mastery. Even if those books aren't the same level or the same quality as what they're supposed to be reading in school, still all good. And it still all will help them in the long run with their academic achievement.
I see a bumper sticker, just read.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really where it's at. But
yeah.
listen,
I mean, reading is reading. And look, as much as I love books and print books, also remember that even if they are on screens, they're reading a lot on screens. And reading is reading. You don't want to prevent a kid from reading what he wants to read.
Well, we could get into that. I wish we had more time because, boy, I could have a conversation with you on that one because I'm not so sure, I'll just throw this out, that what you consume from the screen hits you exactly the same way as what you read. What you catch when you're reading a book, but that's...
well, you're right about that.
Yeah.
No, you are right about that. I mean, studies do show that children and adults, by the way, and I think we all feel this, we absorb and we retain information better when we're reading on paper than when we're reading on a screen.
I don't get that, but I know it's true. Absolutely, absolutely true. Two more things. One is I must ask you this, and you're the editor of the New York Times Book Review. Are you happy with the books, kids' books? Adult books, or do you see that corporations are now controlling what's mass produced these days? How are you feeling about all that?
I'm feeling fantastic.
Ooh.
I have to say, I don't think books have ever been better than they are. And I want to focus on kids' books. I could say a lot about grown-up books. I'm very happy there, too. But to talk about children's books, they are better than ever across the board, and I'll explain why. So board books, quality has gotten better. There's a recognition that every great picture book isn't necessarily a great board book. We know that there's a certain kind of image that works well on the page, and the production quality has gotten better. So that a lot of great picture books used to have to be shortened to work in a board format, but they have improved the printing process, the production process, so that one example is I Want My Hat Back by John Klassen. That just came out in board book. It came out at the full length of the picture book. 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. Board books are better. Picture books are better. And picture books, first of all, the illustration has gotten so much better. The quality of the printing is much better because picture book publishers know they need to make sure that they have kids' attention. The books have to be good. And the situations that are depicted in children's books, the kind of stories they are telling, are geared towards children of today. That means diversity. That means different family configurations. That means that kids see themselves in stories. It used to be, for example, if you were an African-American child in this country, if the book wasn't specifically a book for Black kids, you did not see yourself. There were a couple of exceptions, Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats, Corduroy, but by and large, if a book wasn't about growing up African-American or a book that was sort of published for Black History Month, you weren't in there. Mm-hmm. Now there are representations of kids of all races and ethnicities from all different kinds of families. And that kind of inclusion, that kind of reflection of kids' experiences in their lives, that is powerful. The stories, there are lots of picture books about screens. There are some great ones. There are ones about peace and quiet. There are books about everything that affects kids today. So moving up to middle grade novels, those stories are, there are eternal stories that kids love, fantasy stories, animal stories, but there are also a lot of books about kids these days, and kids want to read about their own experience. That's a reason why Judy Blume was so powerful when I was growing up, because she was talking about our lives as we live them. The last category that's seen a great explosion in terms of quality is YA, young adult books. Those didn't even exist when I was growing up. When I was a kid, you sort of went directly from Sweet Valley High to things like V.C. Andrews, which was, Flowers in the Attic. It was about incest. And then you read grown-up books. You would go to sort of Danielle Steele and Sidney Sheldon. Now there's an explosion in terms of great YA books. And those authors are so good at their jobs because they know that if that book does not grab the reader by page 2, like that kid is gone. Because that kid is used to getting instant gratification on Snapchat. So those books are written in such a way that they get at those powerful teenage emotions. They get at that fast-paced plot. And so they are excellent. They're so good that like a third of YA readers are actually grown-ups because the books are really entertaining.
I have to say this. I want to get this in. Your book is gorgeous. Workman always does a phenomenal job, but this is over the top. This book is just beautifully produced. So let me say that. It also, let me tell the audience that you must pick it up because she also has they both, and Maria Russo, her co-writer, have terrific book suggestions for your kids. You must pick this book up just for that reason alone. But I got a final question for you, kiddo. What was the one book that you read as a child that led you to your becoming the author of How to Raise a Reader? And the esteemed editor of the New York Times Book Review. How about putting you on the spot, kiddo? What is it?
There are so many books. There are so many books, and I could name so many of them. I could start off with picture books and talk about Blueberries for Sal, and just like the idea that there could be so many blueberries, like that was a fantasy when I was growing up. Like you didn't have fresh fruit like that all year round, and they were very expensive. It was just that again. It was like a world that I could only imagine in a book existing, all of those Maine blueberries. But another book that really grabbed me as an older reader, an independent reader, was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle.
Yeah, mine
because
too.
In that book, I saw a heroine who was capable of doing things that, again, felt a little bit beyond reach to me, but she also felt like a very real person, someone who experienced complicated emotions towards her siblings, someone who had powerful relationship, often, again, conflicting with her parents, someone who felt like she didn't always live up to her own, ideals. And so she felt like a real person to me and someone that I could identify with. There's a thing about books where when you have a really good protagonist, that in certain ways you identify with them, and in certain ways it's a bit of a leap. It's like a kind of vicarious reading experience where you're like, well, I'm a little bit like her. I get these emotions, but I could never do that. I could never be that way. And that's in a way the kind of sweet spot for kids to be able to sort of imagine us partly being that character, feeling those emotions, but maybe not being able to live or to do quite what that character is doing in the book.
I end where we began. And where we began, as I said to you, I think this is one of the most important books of the season. I wasn't kidding, Pamela. Really important book. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. I've been speaking with Pamela Paul, the editor of the New York Times Book Review and the co-author, along with Maria Russo, of How to Raise a Reader. For more information on the book, visit PamelaPaul.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec, LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at HalliCasserJayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.